Okay, so hi and welcome to Birth Chat. This is my creative birth channel, and we are meeting in this new sense as if we were in our cafes, how we used to when we did Birth Chat. So today I am meeting with Charlotte Thankyou, who has become a very good friend over the past couple of years. Charlotte works with new mums and pregnant mums, is a massage therapist, and works with energy clearing, which is something that I just don't think there's enough information and enough recognition of what it is that Charlotte does. So I'd love to talk about that with you, Charlotte, today, and for you to tell us what it is that you do.
Hi, so thank you. It's great to be here and have some nice chats and virtual meetings. And I just wish we could do it in person, but still it's a good substitute to start with. So yeah, I came, I guess, to working with birth work through, like most people, through having my own children and realizing how different my experience was from the average. And it was a really wonderful experience for all three of my children. So then I started to, from the first child, started to really specialize what I was already doing in that area, working with pregnant women and new mums as well, sometimes, depending. So energy work, I mean, I do Reiki, and I do work that way, in a more way that's more commonly heard of, but I also use tools that help either clear cellular memories that are stuck in the body somewhere, that are impeding how your body might work, which is obviously important in birth, and also with fears or belief changes and any kind of programming that might prevent you from doing what you want to do. And also I work a lot with memories that we aren't necessarily conscious of, like our own birth, which is really important for most women giving birth. If there's anything from the way they were born that needs to be healed in some way, which also links then into intergenerational trauma, intergenerational patterns, and past life patterns, anything that might impact on how you're showing up today and what you want to do. So it's quite interesting, fascinating subject.
Yes, absolutely. And I love that you touched on your own birth, because I do find in my work that mums, often things come up and they don't know if it's from their own birth, but certain things happen, or they happen repeated, like in a generational pattern. So I often find mums say, well, I'm having a boy, so I know I'm going to be early because all of the women in my family have their boys early. So there's patterns that come up in birth, and I don't know whether that's there's an actual physical reason for that, or whether that is something that happens because we have this kind of ingrained something and
programming, like a kind of, yeah, I don't know all of the science how it works either. I know some of it, but I do think it's really interesting because it's really useful information that often isn't asked, like how do the other women in your family give birth? How has it been historically? Because particularly when it comes to dates like that, particularly if it's late, I know I have one friend who the rest of the women in her family, including her mother and grandmother, birthed quite like 42 weeks or so, and that's really important to know if that's normal for your family.
Absolutely.
So that you're not going to be pushed into an induction that's not necessary. Yeah. And the other way around, like fast births is also something that can be a pattern in the family. And again, tuning into yourself and what you know, like you said, the lady had said, oh, I know I'm going to have, he's a boy, and I'm going to have him early, because they all do. There's that knowledge that that's going to happen for her, that she can listen.
Sometimes that actually influences it, I think, as well.
Yeah, it's probably a bit the chicken and egg, which one comes first. But
first, excuse me, I'm just going to pause you 1 second. Okay, yeah, so I think, and also as well as that kind of experience from their own mum, I've also seen, when I've worked with mums who have had a second birth, and they're absolutely determined not to repeat something that's happened in the first birth, and I've seen it play out in exactly what they thought might happen. And I've just wondered again, like, was there anything that could have been done differently? Because I feel like the mum's done so much work to do this differently, and I've seen something repeat, and I couldn't, like, for me, I was just like, oh, now what, how could that have changed? But I don't think it could have. I feel like almost she had to have it play out that way again, and I can't really explain that.
Yeah, there's a couple of different things I'd say with that. And one of them is that if we do have a strong pattern, and it will keep repeating until we find a way to stop it, like really consciously so. So in that case, the first step's there, the awareness of, I don't want to repeat this. And then it does repeat. And then you can look and say, well, what points it went wrong? Sometimes there are practical things that could have changed. You know, sometimes with the way the system is, you're going into, you've done all the preparation with hypnobirthing, you're all set, and then you go in to the hospital and there's a midwife you don't like, or there's something, maybe you're taking longer than they would like, and something just can set it off derailing, like you. So the system isn't helping, but then you're like, well, why was there a midwife that I didn't like, or why was there this thing that happened there? And it's those things, and that's really what I specialize in, looking at, like, what's going on energetically, that these patterns are repeating. When was the first time the pattern got put in place? So sometimes I don't always go back to the first memories. It's just using an energy technique, often one I use called NPA process, where it can just undo that pattern. It just dissolves, it shifts to a different place. But it's the looking at that, the awareness that there's a pattern that's repeating, and then like breaking the circuit in a way. And often sometimes that is by looking at a memory that will maybe a completely different memory, but it will have the same energetic signature in some way. And sometimes beliefs about, say, being a victim, or they can be very deep, so not on the surface. And it's why sometimes just taking a different action is enough. So sometimes if you've had a difficult birth and you didn't speak up for yourself, or didn't have awareness of, in a certain area, of what could happen, then it's like, I'm not repeating that. And that determination, and then making different choices with that determination, is enough. And you'll have seen wonderful birth experiences with that sometimes. Like, say someone maybe have discovered hypnobirthing and made a different choice with who to go. But I know sometimes I've heard people saying, well, I really want this, but, and then the but comes in. Then women normally know exactly what they want and need. Exactly. And then it gets overridden. So then what I do is I look at why there's either a lack of confidence to stop that, or a sort of fatalistic way almost sometimes, like and also in a sort of patriarchal culture, what I hear very commonly is, I really want to do this, but my partner doesn't. And like unpicking that. And then when I do a lot of work, usually with the person's own birth, you can't remember that consciously usually. So it's one of those where you don't know why you're scared, or you don't know why these things are happening, because you can't remember it happening before. And you haven't made a link with it in any way. I think the things keep happening until you've made that. I think on a soul level, your soul wants you to learn and grow and change these patterns. And there's a big calling, I think, at the moment to really, for women to really step up and reclaim birth and rebalance where the sort of more masculine system that doesn't support physiological birth is really taken over the dialogue.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's this kind of feeling, which I think it goes throughout society really, of if I don't do things the way that the system tells me to, I won't be safe. And I think that's just a real belief that, you know, as doulas and as birth workers, that we have to work on with mums, because like you say, a mum will come with a very good idea of what she wants, and then a million reasons why she can't have it. And it's very sad when that does play out almost as if she foresaw how it would go, and it didn't need to go that way. And I just think we need to really have a deep understanding of the fact that we don't have to go that way. I think from my own experience, my family comes from people who gave birth unassisted generally, and when I was confronted with my first midwife appointment, I was told that I would need a section. I just couldn't understand it, couldn't make sense of it, because it didn't make any sense to me, and I had to go through a process of taking myself outside of that completely, because I think if I had opted to do what was being suggested, I just think it would have been so damaging, and I felt really that I needed to follow my gut and do what I had to do on my own. I don't know, and I didn't have a lot of experience of birth. My mum seemed to say that my birth was unremarkable. There wasn't much to say about it, although I wonder if I was born face first, because I've had a baby that was born that way, and it does resonate very, it brings back some kind of very tiny snippets of memories which I can't even explain. And she and I have talked about it actually, like fears of going on a roller coaster where you go backwards over your head, and nightmares where like my head's stuck leaning back, and my daughter who's born that way also has similar. So I don't know whether that sort of comes into it, but my mum didn't seem to have much to say about my birth and my brother's, but the one birth that I did know about that was very medicalised, went very badly, that was in my family as well, and so I think that as well, just that knowledge from my past just made me think I can't have too much outside involvement. I have to do this myself, and I just had that determination in myself that I have to do this myself, and I can't put it into someone else's hands. How to explain that?
Yeah, because I think there's a really big difference between handing over your autonomy into someone else's hands where you don't feel you have any really say over it, and inviting someone you trust into your space to support you. So anyone listening who may, because at the moment there's a lot of increase with the pandemic, as we record this, there's a lot of interest in home birth and free birth, but some other people are feeling backed into a corner with it rather than choosing it.
That should never be the reason.
Yeah, which shouldn't be the case. And I'm hoping that the positive side of that is more people experiencing how wonderful home birth can be when they might not have originally chosen it, because people are choosing it because they feel safer at home than the hospital. And the ironic thing is that, irrelevant of a pandemic, that is a true statement backed up by evidence that it's safe at home. And that's not always believed. And again, I always say if we were taught to and trusted tuning into our own intuition, we'd know where we needed to give birth. And if it was a default that it was safe at home, most of the time, given clearing out all those old blocks and fears, we'd just choose to birth at home. And then the ones who didn't would be the ones who needed the hospital for a reason. Yeah. And then we'd never ignore that. The women are always right when they say, I need to go in now, something's not right.
Yeah.
Whether it's showing up clinically or not, usually a woman will know before there are clinical signs. Whether she's used to listening to that and acting on it is a different matter. And that's one of the things that I like to work with women, getting to know their own bodies and practicing listening to what it's telling them.
Yeah, that's so important, because I do feel like that gets sort of undermined by what happens in our system, because I do feel like a lot of times there's a lot of instances where, I don't know how to put this exactly, but we get almost told that we have to come in and be checked in case we're ill. And to me, I feel like that kind of puts it into our minds that when we come to birth that we won't know, and it's just so against what actually happens in birth, because every time, as you say, every time that a mum needs support, she knows it. She knows it at whatever point, and she knows that she's got time to get it as well. Nobody that I've seen is like, oh, emergency, and then there's had a situation. That mum's gone, okay, I think I'm going into labour now, but I've got a feeling I need to have this baby in hospital. I've got a feeling I don't want to go to hospital. I want to stay where I am. There's time. Labour, you know, on TV, labour is just kind of this thing where your water's going, you're rushed in, and something happens dramatic. And it's so not like that in real life. Labour is such a long journey with so many twists and turns, and it's such a time when you can listen to yourself and you will know when you.
Yeah. I think that's the part of the terminology of, say, emergency cesarean. We think an emergency is something that's life-threatening, and it's not usually the reason. It's not the top reason. An actual life-threatening, we really got to save you right now, this second before you die, is so rare. And I've heard many stories where there's been a lot of pressure to change the birth plan to a cesarean in labour, and the woman has eventually said yes, and suddenly everyone relaxes that she said yes, and the next minute half an hour will pass, an hour will pass, they're not in the theatre yet, and then someone else will come in who's more of an emergency, so 2 hours have passed, and the woman's going, hold on a minute, this is an emergency, you know, isn't it? You're supposed to be saving my baby. And then, yeah, and of course there are cases where there is a true emergency, although there are many that are influenced by not heeding what's normal and needed for a physiological birth, what's the environment needed that can then contribute. But it's such a minefield once you start getting into it, and that's what I feel is overall as a population there's a growing awareness, but still a surprise almost, because we are taught, certainly I was taught as children, to trust doctors, and the history, when you look into the detailed history of the maternity system, it's not what we think it is. So it's not created purely around supporting the physiological birthing woman, and it's also a system that's to try and get a lot of women giving birth through a system where it's based on efficiency as well, which is not what it would be if it was in your own home with a one-on-one carer. Like, all the reports say what's needed, but putting it in place. So there's some quite encouraging things coming down the pipeline, I think, with continuity of carer and implementing the better births, but it's not here yet completely. The caseload midwifery is in some areas, but not in others. And I think that for the change to really happen, it's for more women to start asking for more, as in asking for more respect, more choosing what they want and really putting their foot down on getting it.
What do you think
less
to happen for that kind of
I think on an individual level, it's starting with yourself in your own personal life and doing that in your own life. So clearing out where you're fearful and not taking action in whatever area of the life. And people coming to me who are pregnant, that is the area they're really focused on for their child, to bring instinctively what they really want. And so like the kind of work I do, like the inner work, if you like, to really change wherever you feel you can't have what you want, you can't go for what you want. And it's particularly difficult, I think, in a time like the pandemic, where there's a lot of rules saying you can't do this because it's not safe, or we have to do these things differently. And I would say part of the answer to that is feel safe in your own body, in your own person, before you go anywhere or doing anything else is key, because often women are choosing the hospital because they feel safer, or even if they're choosing the home because they feel safer, it's because there's an unsafe element out there somewhere. So they're feeling that birth is risky or unsafe, or they're not feeling safe in some way, so they're seeking safety. But if you found safety, and the given start is really being at home with being alive in a human body and life itself in a really strong way, I don't know if I'm able to put this into the words of how I feel it, then the choices will be different. The choices are aligned to what you want in a really different way. But It's not just accepting what an external person who can't know what's right for you is saying. And I really wish it wasn't the case that we had to question decisions made by care providers in hospitals, or, you know, some people are absolutely wonderful, brilliant, and others are not. Consultants particularly can sometimes get a bad name for not being supportive, but there are wonderful ones out there who are more supportive than some midwives. It's an individual. And so that's why I love to work with people, because what I've seen is when you transform, starting with yourself, which you have choice over your own, how you feel about your body and what you can do there. When you transform that, the external world, transforms along with it. So the unfriendly consultant or midwife suddenly off duty when you go into labour, or something like that will happen. That's what happened for me a number of times.
What I'm understanding. Good morning. What I'm hearing and understanding from what you're saying is that when we feel safe within our own body, which is very different than looking for an external safety, then we start to make changes on a level that we can't explain, in terms of outside things shift when we have that kind of inner safety. So that safety then comes from inside of ourselves, and nothing outside is going to be the provider of that. Does that make sense?
So the safety's already there on the inside, and it's more of a discernment on what do I need now. So if there is a situation, for example, which is everyone's greatest fear, that something isn't quite right, you can recognize that message and signal from your body for what it is. Whereas if you're starting from a place of fear, you don't know, because you're already feeling fearful. So is that fear a crazy thought, or is it really a signal? But if you're starting from a place of safety and listening to your body, you will hear the signals, everything's okay. Most of the time that's what women are hearing, and they'll say, oh, I wanted to get in this position, but I didn't like to ask, or, you know, I didn't know how to say, because you can't verbalize in labor as easily. So women know what they want, and a strong danger signal is, or something that needs to make a difference, is much easier to hear when there's not all the noise from fears that aren't actually happening. But valid fears, I'm not to say that it's not valid to have those fears, because there'll be a reason why you've got them. It'll be a historical thing. And so the more you clear out those and rediscover from an experiential point of view, not from a theory, because we can read all the books and it does help, but it's the experience inside yourself. I think that's why hearing stories of people who've been there, even more in books, it's already helpful to read, and if you can speak to people, because they've got their own energy body, and mirror neurons happen from the science perspective. So if you're listening to their story where they know that you can do it, you can pick up on that confidence and start to remember it in yourself, because you won't remember something that's not true for you. But when you're faced with those stories and women are saying, yeah, this is how I did it and it was like this, then it sparks something off that's inside you wanting to be woken up, because we're not trying to do something crazy. It's something that's kind of like your birthright. So it's just waiting to be sparked into action.
So I think what I'm hearing is like when you clear those stories or those things that come up for you, that you're then able to hear the voice of actually what your instincts are telling you, without all of the chatter that goes along with it, that's coming from a place that isn't your instinct. It's coming from something remembered or something that's triggered you. So and it could be your own birth, or a birth that you know about, or something like that, and that is chatting to you and getting in the way of you hearing your actual instinct. Is that?
Yeah, there's a lot of noise. There's noise in the form of media and other people's scary experiences and genuine survival fears, and that's before you get onto your own personal life experience, where maybe you don't like hospitals, or maybe you don't like certain things that could be similar. But like if you we're gonna have a right baby party in a minute.
I'm just going to pause
It's
for
always the way.
Mum, yeah. Pause for 1 second.
Thank you. I've been handed a chocolate biscuit. Must be refreshment time.
Yeah. Oh, where's it gone?
So an analogy might be like, if you come into the room like just before and there's babies shouting over here and over there and the television's on there and the radio's on there and the radio's on over there and someone else got the phone on over there, but you want to listen to someone's ringing you and you want to speak to them, you can't really hear until you in your own space or turn off all the screens. You just can't hear the signal. And it's a practice in moving away from the analogy. It is a practice that we've favoured in the West, the rational mind and what we can learn and what we can pin down and see and know and measure, and those things are really useful, but they're not the whole story. And we need to reclaim that other side of us where we have the instincts, the intuition, and there is scientific and valid. It's just we haven't learned how to measure them as well, but there is scientific and valid as all the other rational things we can measure really simply, like with a tape measure or with, you know, like say taking your and so I really like that. It's what I did, and when you practice and you have tools you can use in labour, it's what I did with my own 3 children as well. So it
so practice, like when you say practice, how can you practice something like that?
So if you're practicing listening to your intuition, it can be on anything, because I know I've had a habit in the past of I'll get a hit to go somewhere or to do something, or to, I'm trying to think of a specific example. I can't think of a specific example. I'll get a hit to move that cup off the side because it's going to get smashed. The next minute the kid comes in and smashes it. But what'll happen is that I'll have got the hit to move the cup off the side and then go, no, don't be silly. Straight away in my head, what? No one's going to knock that off. Or I'll be trying to look cool. Like, I'd be like, no, you can just wing this and go through. And it's like, but the voice has said prepare for that a bit earlier. And then I didn't do it, and then the thing happened, but I recognized belatedly that I got the hit for it. So it's practicing on really small things that don't matter. Whenever you hear that, do it. Whenever you hear it, do it. And notice what you're saying to yourself, what your internal dialogue is to yourself. That's one way you can practice really simply. And
really becoming aware of what that dialogue looks like and sounds like as you go through the day, really.
Yeah. Yeah, like taking a bit of time. And so there's a couple of things that I think are helpful. One of them is like talking to the baby in a different way than everyone's told to talk to the baby, and people play at Mozart, and you know, you stroke the baby instinctively, and many people know how to talk to the baby, but it doesn't occur to them as often to tell your baby what you want for the birth, to practice it with the baby, so that they're in a visualization that you include like the baby, because it's, people forget that the baby's sentient in a way that we can connect with like an ordinary conversation. I know you do this quite naturally and have done this with your children quite naturally, but I think it's a skill that I've had and you've had, that people sometimes just need the idea to be sown that they can do this, and then occasionally instruction on how to do it, but it's not, because it's not an ordinary way that we converse. You think of the babies inside, when it comes out, they start to be, you can talk to them, but they can't talk back yet. And that's actually not very accurate, because they communicate so much. They relive their birth experience in when they're born, with their mannerisms and their cries and the way they talk, but you can talk to them whilst they're inside. I would normally visualize it, but some people are more can hear or can sense a feeling, and just asking the baby, what do you need, what do you want, and this is what's going to happen, and it's going to be a bit like this, and is there anything you need me to release or to know? And the body, you can talk to the body, it has its own consciousness as well. Like, they're all different levels of consciousness that we can talk to and get answers for what we need.
I just feel like we could talk about this for hours. There's just so many places you can go with this, and I just feel like it's such a key to changing so much as well.
Our own birth experience is one of the biggest missing links, because we don't remember it generally, and because so many people, both in our generation and if you take it back a generation before, because we were already physically we were eggs in the grandmother's body. If you think of that era, we're talking twilight births and the war. Depending on how old you are, because I'm a bit older now, so my grandmother was having my mum just after the war, which was a lot of time of scarcity and lack. And although there was also less medicalization in many ways than now, there are women at that age who were having twilight births, and which I'm guessing people may or may not know. That was when women were drugged up. I know you know, but like we're like drugged up and don't remember anything, so that can have had an impact. But any trauma through the line like that can be really useful to clear, because it may be that when you were being formed as a baby inside your mother, you picked up certain beliefs and thoughts about what life and birth were like, and then even in the egg kind of thing, and I don't know how exactly it works, but I know it's passed down like that. And then when what was happening for your mother, who will have got her mother and her grandmother's lineage coming through when you were born, and so that when you come to be giving birth yourself, you're entering a similar place that you were, so those memories come up when they might never have done before, or probably you are acting in life that you've formed these ways of how the world works and how to be in the world then, and forgotten about that, and then that's just how you are. But it's actually, you can change the aspects of that where you're not so confident.
That's brought up a couple of things for me. Initially with both of my boys, and I know you know this story, but with both of my boys, I was able to speak to them before the birth, and I was telling my son off, my first son, stop playing with the cord because you'll get it wrapped around your neck. And I don't know whether because I said it or because I just knew what he was doing, but he did come out with the cord around his neck, and I knew to look for it because I just felt that was something that he would do, and was fiddling with it when he shouldn't be. And my other son, I told him to move his hand down because it was on his head when he was trying to be born. And my doula, who was there, just thought I was talking to her, and it didn't make sense to her. But he did come out with his hand beside his head, and he always had his hand beside his head, which again I knew. So what you're saying there,
children know their own minds and what they want, don't they? They're very strong about
and
this.
as well, they do communicate. Like, I knew what they were doing, but there was nothing to see or nothing to make me know that. I just knew it. And then secondly, and this is getting into kind of the territory where you talk about the eggs and even kind of more spiritual than that, is that I knew, especially with both of my girls, I knew that they were coming before I was pregnant. And I speak to my daughter about this a lot, actually, and because she's 14, she's coming to the age where she's kind of exploring her spirituality as well. And we talk about this in that I knew she was there, and I knew that she was in a hurry to be born, and I wasn't particularly planning on having another child quite so soon after my first, but she was in a hurry, and I just sensed her, and I can't explain it. I wasn't talking to her, I wasn't in communication with somebody that was there. I just sense, and it came out of my mouth one day because somebody said to me, "Will you have more children?" I said, "Oh, I don't plan on having any. I want to go back to work and do this and do these things until my son goes to school, and then maybe have another one. But there's a little girl that's in a hurry to come." And I was like, where did I come from? So it wasn't even like I was having these conversations. I was aware of her, and it was exactly true. And she was in a hurry, and the way that she birthed was the way that I sensed her.
The same energy feeling of who the person is, because they're not blank slates when they come in. And I've interviewed other people before when I was doing my summit, where your personality can change slightly when you're pregnant, because you're not just you. So the baby is expressing themselves through you, through your body, because they don't have a body yet to express. So they will be telling you, no, I don't like to drink that or eat that food. Some of the, people talk about it in terms of hormones and so on, but a lot of the, diet change, it's not just diet changes, but music tastes, where you want to go, where they want to be born, they're communicating that with you. And because we're not used to that in our society, we just think, oh, I just got this feeling. Sometimes it's the baby yelling at you, hey, I want to be born here. And like, you're very in tune, so you were able to actually have the conversation. But the knowledge that is possible can really help. Like, so just like say a meditation CD to put you in a quiet space, and then just ask the baby, or a drumming CD. There is some drumming can help get into the right mind wave space, but to really find out what they want and why, like a real conversation, because they're a baby who's not actually verbal yet. You're kind of talking to them on a different level, so they can talk, even though when they're born, then they can't talk in words. They're talking in a different way. It might just be a feeling, or you might just hear it. Some people hear it, but it's like you said, you can sense the difference between that energy and your own when you.
Yeah, and I think if you can trust what you're experiencing while you're pregnant, like the benefits actually when the baby has arrived, that to know that, in those moments of frustration, and even if you do have this skill, you have those moments of frustration when you don't know what they want, and you've tried everything, and sometimes it is just like, can I recreate that kind of moment of peace and kind of hear what baby's saying? And sometimes that is true, but even if you can't, it brings you back to a place of instinct and things that you hadn't thought of trying, you might try. And also it just helps you to feel calmer as a parent, because there's nothing more frustrating than your own baby's cry. It is designed to make your ears just go, oh, stop it, like what is wrong? And not being able to give the baby what it is that they need is just like the most frustrating thing in the world. So
yeah, but recognizing all the different movements and cries as a communication that's beyond just crying is really helpful to be able to do something about it, or just to listen to them. I know my youngest son kind of recreated, he was obviously reliving the birth, because he started making the same noise that I did when I was giving birth. As he was crying, he kind of yelled in a way that, maybe no one else would have thought that. I've no idea. I know on one of the births I thought I was really loud, and my husband said I wasn't making that much noise, so my perception might be different. But what I knew as I heard him kind of yelling was, I was like, oh wow, he sounds like it's the same intonation, the same. And I was like, he's reliving the birth experience and telling me something about it, because it was a great birth experience, but I don't know what his thoughts were at the time, what he was. I had lots of different emotions come through, and I don't know which ones were his and mine. I know I was having panic attacks a few days before the birth, and I tried to shift it by myself with my tools, and I couldn't. And I was getting massive panic attacks. And then I called a colleague, and in half an hour, it's just gone. And she said she thought it was his fears about being born. And at the end of the half an hour, I'd gone back into that space, and I hadn't realised how much tension I was carrying. I hadn't realised how fearful I'd become. And the panic attacks were extreme, but the rest of the time outside the panic attack, I was still carrying this tension, low-level tension, but that had become normal. And it was only when I released it all that I was like, oh, and I just felt all this warm glow, and I was at peace, and I was really happy. And he was ready to come then, but my midwife had said, I'll come anytime, but I've got a shift this day, so it'll be great if he doesn't come on that day. So he waited a whole day and was born like the day after her shift. And I know that he could have come the day of her shift, but he didn't. And I think it was an agreement not to, but it was because it was like an agreement with us all. But it was interesting that he had the fears, and I couldn't understand the fears because they weren't mine. So I struggled to understand and release them, because I was looking for what was fearful in me, even though I was working with it. But when I worked with someone else, they were able to spot it and to clear it, what I couldn't see for myself.
wow.
But, that was quite
cool.
cool.
I could just talk about this all day. What I'd really love to hear from you is how do people go about contacting you, and what is there anything that you recommend reading, or what resources do you recommend to people who are pregnant and kind of going, yeah, I absolutely need some of that clearing, what do I do now? So
yeah, I can give you some different links. So there's my website is birthessence.co.uk, and I can give you some links, and there's some links on the website to some of the tools that I use that you can try out yourself to see if you like them. Like the NPA process, for example, that I mentioned earlier, the compassion key. There's different ways you can try. They're so simple you can try them out yourself. I've got some book recommendations on there. I think for reading, it's whatever you're drawn to, but reading lots of positive stories about other women who have given birth is really helpful. Or I didn't always like to watch them on YouTube. I preferred to read them, but some people love to watch positive stories and get benefit that way. There's so many wonderful books, that there's more and more wonderful books all the time. Yeah, so I'll have to think about which books I recommend, but certainly books that like I like Natalie Medding's writing, and I like with How to Have a Baby. I like the Give Birth Like a Feminist, for people who are concerned about the system to really have their eyes opened. But I know in the past many people didn't recommend that as much to someone who's already pregnant, in case it made them more concerned. But I think there's got to a state now where I've seen people recommending it nevertheless, because people are ready to make big changes and differences, and you can't ignore what's happening with the COVID pandemic. So there too, I'm just
what I'll do then, I'll include those underneath when I put the video up.
Yeah, just too. I've got a whole in the birth summit that I did, that most of the people I interviewed were authors. So there's some amazing books, and there's also a new book, Informed is Best, which I haven't read yet, which I've heard a lot of good things about, and there's lots of things like that. But for people who are facing specific challenges, I think the AIMS booklets are really great.
I was going to say that. In fact,
yeah, they're absolutely fabulous, because they're not expensive, and the Am I Allowed, that answers so many of the starting point. So it depends, again, if you're looking for like inspiration and wonderful stories and practical things on like how to have a baby, like Natalie mentioned, like here's how it works physiologically. You need to know how it works physiologically, and then create the environment that'll support the physiology, and recognize that even getting in your car is a form of an intervention, although a softer one than others might be. And then when you're coming up in questions, when you've decided a little bit how you want to do it, the Am I Allowed and that style of book will help you. And having the knowledge of things like it's sad that, but having the knowledge that there are places and people that you can go to get support with that kind of knowledge, and not trying to do it all yourself if possible, like having a doula, like someone like yourself who can be your advocate, because you don't want to be advocating for yourself in labour. You want to be
doula, you've got that continuity, you've got somebody who's sat there, and even if you've done different clearing and you've done hypnobirthing, you've done things with different people, your doula you can then come and tell them, okay, this is where I'm at, this is what's happened, and they are literally there with you for the journey. So that just gives you that continuity.
Yeah, I'll tell you very quickly how I first started exploring my own birth, just very briefly. I think I've said it before on my website, but I wasn't looking for it. Now I take people through it, but I was going through the process, one of the processes that I do, and just going through my body, and I suddenly found myself in a corridor, a Harry Potter corridor initially, and then suddenly it was a bright light, and I was terrified, and I was sat on my chair like this, like I'm terrified. And then I was like, what is this? It's some kind of hospital. And I was trying to work out. I was like, yeah, I was 12. No, I wasn't 12. I was younger than that. I was like, I'm terrified. And then I realized I was being born. And then it, like many of the memories that have come through for me like that, they kind of like flashpoints of the bit that really mattered, and not necessarily that I know all the details. So there was a bright light. I knew I'd been given birth, and it was like my mum was there, and then she wasn't there, and then the doctors, and how invasive I felt it. And in that very first one, it was mostly being terrified, and then not being able to be held by my mum straight away. So the terror in itself would have been fine had my mum been able to hold me. That would have been then processed in real time, and it wouldn't have been stored. But there was no one to hold me, so then I had to try and cope with that myself as a baby. And so I was able to heal that and be held by my mum in the visualization to heal that and to let it all out. And I was so transformed by that that I just kept remembering it, for the feeling of being held by my mum as a baby. I kept reliving it. I remember cycling to work once and just going, oh, life's good. Like, you know, like, because I was getting those feelings that I hadn't had at the time coming up spontaneously as an adult. And this was part of the inspiration for me to do things differently then with my son and make sure that I wasn't in an environment where that would happen to me. And wanting to birth at home, and it to be very much, I guess I got a glimpse into, in inviting what could have happened, I got a glimpse into birth at its best, as like a sacred rite of passage, or a sacred kind of ordinary life event, really, but in a full powerful life event with women are really powerful, and what we can do, and the baby coming in, that like amazing being coming in. So that's how I started. And after that it kept happening because at that time I wasn't having children, I wasn't married, I was single, I think, and I was getting to an age where I knew I wanted that. And so it kept happening. I kept revisiting different aspects of my birth because I'd experienced it as deeply traumatic, and it had made me more shy and things that I didn't realize as a child. I had no idea. I had a very loving upbringing. It was just that moment of birth. As I work with people, it's often things that have happened in pregnancy as well, and there's different aspects. There's a couple of times I went into pregnancy, it was mostly the birth, and then after I'd healed all that, sometimes I'd be, it really gave me the courage and the determination to do something differently. What I find with women that come now, this is something I'd like women to take away, is that people that either come because something's going wrong in their pregnancy and they come way too late on instead of preparing before it's needed, or something's gone wrong for their plans the first birth and the second they want to do it differently. And I was lucky, if you like, something had gone wrong with my birth when I was born, so before my first child I was preparing to make up for that. And I think that not everyone's had a really traumatic being born, but there's elements that we can look at and learn from to change with, so that it's not just patterns repeating themselves mindlessly. And I've also had links to past life stuff that have come up through that as well, that through going to what always happens, whether it's past life, intergenerational, just your own life with different childhood memories, it's essentially that the energy signature of that pattern is repeating with different situations. And while that is still locked in place underneath, then you'll keep getting situations. So if you've like, say somebody shouted when you were being born and you were scared, and then that has become somehow a pattern. You might have a shouty boss, you might leave that job, but then you have a shouty boyfriend, you might leave that boyfriend, but then you get another shouty neighbor, or there's something will keep coming up. And what I found with the past life, even, it was the same thing. There's one very strong memory where I'd gone into healing. It was something in the present day was happening where I was feeling scared, and I was feeling excessively scared for what was happening, so I knew something was going on. And I felt that something, I don't know whether it was something to do with my mum, but I wasn't sure. So when I went into like a process, I found I was at the back of the birth memory, and it was where I was being taken away from my mum, and I couldn't control that. And then suddenly, because I'd worked on that before, and suddenly it went, and I was in like as an older child running away from a natural disaster, and I got separated from my mum in the crowd and I couldn't find her again. And I don't know what happened after that. It was just a snapshot. So when I cleared that older memory and then brought that through into the birth memory and then brought it through to the present day, then I wasn't scared in the present day anymore. So it was really cool.
That's just so fascinating. It really resonates, because I know my own life, and I know it's the same for so many people as well, that like the word you use, energy signature, I can totally understand what that is, and that it just keeps on repeating, and I don't know, like, yeah, I can see how you could get stuck like that, and just to know that there's options of like moving forward, it's fascinating. Really worth exploring, I think. So, wow, well, thank you so much for chatting today. I'm going to stop the recording and say goodbye to everyone who's watching. If you want to know more about Charlotte's work or get in touch with Charlotte, I'm going to leave the links below, and you can have a look at her website. And we'll say goodbye for now. If you want to stay on, that's fine.
Yeah, thank you. It's lovely hearing more of your stories. I love your stories of your connection with your children, and it's inspiring.
All right, take care then. I'll see you, Charlotte.
Bye.